There is a country where the president must always be a Christian, the prime minister must always be a Sunni Muslim, and the speaker of parliament must always be a Shia Muslim. That arrangement appears nowhere in the country's constitution. It rests on an unwritten agreement reached in 1943 and on a population count taken in 1932. The country is Lebanon, and it has not held an official census since 94 years. This is the story of how a state came to be built on a single set of numbers and what happened to that state as the numbers aged. To understand it, we have to start not with a country but with a mountain. For most of the Ottoman period, there was no Lebanon. There was Mount Lebanon, a mountainous district along with the Eastern Mediterranean with an unusual religious composition. It was home to the Maronites, an Eastern Catholic community in communion with Rome, and to the Druze, followers of a faith that had branched from Ismaili Islam in the 11th century. In 1860, conflict between Druze and Maronite communities in the mountain escalated into large-scale massacres, and violence spread to Damascus. European powers intervened. Under an international agreement, the Ottomans established Mount Lebanon as an autonomous province, with a Christian governor and a representative council whose seats were allocated by religious community. Hold on to that detail, because it is the origin of everything that follows as early as the 1860s. In this one district, political representation was already being distributed by sect. The First World War ended the Ottoman Empire and it devastated Mount Lebanon. Famine and blockade killed a very large share of the district's population. Historians estimate vary widely, but the losses were catastrophic by any measure. At the San Remo conference in the 1920, France was allocated the mandate of Syria and Lebanon. Maronite leaders had been preparing for exactly this. Patriarch Elias Hoek traveled to the Paris Peace Conference in 1919 to argue the case for a Lebanese state under the French protection and for a state larger than the mountain alone. On the 1st of September 1920, General Henry Gouraud stood in Beirut and proclaimed the state of Greater Lebanon. That word, greater, carries the whole story. France did not draw the new state around the Christian heartland. It attached the coastal cities of Beirut, Tripoli, Sidon and Tyre, and inland, the Bekaa Valley. Those regions brought ports, farmland and economic viability. They also brought large Sunni and Shia Muslim populations, many of whom rejected the new entity outright and wanted to be a part of Syria. So the state created to secure a Christian homeland was, from its first day, a state in which that community's majority was far narrower than it had been in the mountain. 12 years later, somebody counted exactly how narrow. In 1932, the French Mandate authorities conducted a census. It found a Christian majority, a narrow one, and the precise figures differ between sources. But narrow was enough. That count became the arithmetic foundation of the political order, and it has never been repeated. As Lebanon moved towards independence in 1943, its leaders had to convert that arithmetic into a working state. Two men, the Maronite president Bechara el-Khoury and the Sunni prime minister Riyad al-Soud, arrived at an understanding. Christians would accept that Lebanon was an Arab country and abandon the idea of permanent French protection. Muslims would accept Lebanon as an independent state and abandon the goal of union with Syria. And power would be divided by sect: the presidency to the Maronites, the premiership to the Sunnis, the speakership of parliament to the Shia, with parliamentary seats split 6-5 in favor of Christians. That arrangement is called the National Pact. It was never written down. One of the most consequential power-sharing agreements of the 20th century exists as an understanding between two men. And it could function on exactly one condition: that the numbers underneath it were never checked again. For a while, nobody needed to. Lebanon was doing extremely well. For roughly 3 decades, the design appeared to work. By the 1960s, Beirut was widely called the Paris of the Middle East. It was the banking capital of the Arab world, a place where money fleeing coups and nationalizations elsewhere in the region could find shelter. It had internationally regarded universities, the freest press in the Arab world, publishing houses, a film industry, and a tourist economy that drew visitors from every neighboring capital. But underneath the prosperity, the demographic assumptions were shifting. Muslim communities were growing faster, Christian emigration was higher. The distribution of power stayed fixed at the 1932 ratio, while the population it was meant to represent moved away from it. Lebanese politics had no mechanism for adjusting this, because adjusting it would require a census, and the census would threaten every share. A system that cannot update itself can still look stable for a long time. What it cannot do is absorb a shock, and the shock was coming from outside Lebanon's borders. The Arab War of 1948 sent well over 100,000 Palestinian refugees into Lebanon, and the 1967 war sent more. They were overwhelmingly Sunni Muslim, and under Lebanese law, they were not granted citizenship, which meant they were outside the sectarian settlement entirely, living in a country whose whole political logic was based on counting. In 1969, under pressure from other Arab states, Lebanon signed the Cairo Agreement, which permitted Palestinian factions to operate armed from Lebanese territory. Then came a decision taken in another country. In 1970, King Hussein of Jordan moved against the Palestinian armed factions in what became known as Black September and expelled them. The PLO's armed leadership relocated to Beirut. Now run the logic. A state whose stability depended on a frozen census now hosted an armed movement answerable to no Lebanese authority, operating from its territory, drawing Israeli reprisals onto Lebanese soil. Christian parties built militias in response. Muslim and leftist parties allied with the Palestinians. Every faction armed. The unwritten understanding of 1943 had no provision for any of this. On the 13th of April 1975, gunmen attacked a bus in the Beirut suburb of Ain al-Remaneh, and the war that everyone had anticipated began. It lasted 15 years. Syria intervened in 1967. Israel invaded in 1978 and again in 1982, reaching Beirut and forcing the PLO leadership out of the country. Death toll estimates commonly run as high as 150,000 people, with roughly 1 million displaced. Out of the conditions of the 1982 invasion and the Israeli occupation of the south, a new force emerged among Lebanon's Shia community, Hezbollah. Its full story is a separate video on my channel. The war was brought to an end by the Taif Agreement, negotiated in Saudi Arabia in 1989 and implemented through 1990. It made real changes. Parliament moved from 6 to 5 to an even 50-50 split between Christians and Muslims. Executive power was shifted from the Maronite presidency to the Sunni premiership and the cabinet. Militias were ordered to disband. So Taif did rebalance the system. What it did not do was end the principle that power is allocated by sect at all. And the way it handled the militias tells you why it mattered. A broad amnesty covered wartime crisis. Militia leaders disarmed, entered parliament and cabinet, and became the country's governing class. One organization, Hezbollah, retained its weapon under an exemption framed around resistance to Israeli occupation of the south. The confessional system was not dismantled. It was renegotiated and then frozen again. What followed functioned as a long test of the post-war settlement. Syrian forces remained in Lebanon and dominated its politics for 15 years. In February 2005, the former Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri was assassinated by a bomb in Beirut. Mass demonstrations followed, by some counts approaching 1 million people, and Syrian troops withdrew that April. In 2019, the Lebanese economy collapsed. The currency lost more than 95% of its value. Banks froze depositors out of their savings. The World Bank described the crisis as among the most severe episodes globally since the mid-19th century. Then on the 4th of August 2020, approximately 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate detonated in the port of Beirut. It had been stored there for 6 years. Officials at multiple levels had been warned in writing. More than 200 people were killed, thousands were injured, and the blast was felt in Cyprus, over 200 kilometers away. Here is the pattern worth noticing. In each of these events, the institutions that failed, the security services, the judiciary, the central bank, the port authority, were institutions whose senior appointments were distributed by sectarian quota. That is not proof of a single cause, but scholars of consociational systems argue that when every port is a communal share, holding any individual accountable means taking something from a community. So why was sectarianism built into Lebanon's DNA? Not because of any single decision. It came from an Ottoman arrangement in the 1860s that allocated council seats by religion. From French borders in 1920 that expanded a state beyond the community it had designed for. From a census in 1932 that fixed those proportions in place. And from a pact of 1943 that turned them into permanent offices without even writing them down. Every one of those choices was reasonable to the people making it. Together they produced a state that could rebalance itself. Taif proved that, but only at the price of 15-year war, and only by keeping the underlying principle intact. Lebanon's founders did not build a country that was destined to fail. They built one in which changing the rules costs more than almost anyone would be willing to pay. The organization that came out of the 1982 invasion has shaped Lebanon ever since. And I have told this full story separately. That video is on screen now. And if you want the other half of this claim, my Jordan video explains where Black September began and why its consequences landed in Beirut.